Welcome and thank you for choosing to watch my talk about the link between temporal coupling in dyadic interactions and emotion recognition. My name is Julia, and together with my colleagues Adam, Britta and Jörn, we decided to get a deeper understanding of what emotion recognition is based on. So we know that the human body is a rich and reliable source of nonverbal information. Even if we display it in a very diminished form, such as point light displays, for example, we are able to quickly identify the gender of a person, their mood, their age, and we can even tell if a person is familiar or not. Within human interactions, affective states can be understood as a dynamic process, which develop over time and space. So combining these two, research has found that within meaningful interactions, the bodily actions of one person serve as the predictor for the expected actions of the other person. This phenomenon has been termed interpersonal predictive coding. So it is assumed that we possess implicit knowledge about the natural dynamics of human interaction, which guide the processing of movement patterns. So we asked ourselves, does the recognition of emotions from dyadic interactions that are displayed by body movements depend on a fixed spatio-temporal coupling of the actions between the individuals? We investigated this in terms of emotion recognition accuracy and in terms of valence perception. That is how negatively or positively a scene is perceived to be, or rather an interaction is perceived to be. We used the following methods. Using motion capture, we created point light displays displaying either anger, happiness, affection, or sadness. We then manipulated the stimulus material by randomly selecting the actions of one agent and delaying them by either 0, 500, 1000, or 2000 milliseconds. The paradigm looked as follows. We started with the fixation phase. We then showed the stimulus, which lasted for 2 seconds. And in the last step, we asked participants to rate the valence of the interaction, as well as the emotional category that the interaction belongs to. So we found something very interesting. We found that with increasing temporal offset, the recognition accuracy actually decreased linearly, but only for affection and anger scenes. Happiness and sadness sequences were not impacted at all by the temporal offset. So for subjective valence perception, we found something very similar. We found again that only affection and anger scenes were impacted, and we also found that with a maximum temporal offset of 2000 milliseconds, the scene was perceived to be less intense than the original scene. So to sum it up, we found that for anger and affection sequences, temporal decoupling of one of the agent's actions within the emotional interaction led to a decrease in recognition performance. We also found that the scenes were perceived to be less intense when the sequences were displayed with a maximal temporal offset of 2000 milliseconds. Okay, so how do we explain these results? We may assume that there are certain emotions that have a stronger interpersonal character than others, and therefore depend more on a fixed spatial-temporal coupling of the actions. We can also assume that there are functional relations between the interactional partners and that observers take contextual information into account when judging these scenes. Research has also shown that contingency of movement patterns, that is the temporal and spatial relatedness of these movements, facilitates the perception of meaning in a visual stimulus, which suits very well with our results that show that contingency of movement patterns facilitates recognition of the stimulus. It is thought that we apply temporal predictions that are generated online in our own motor system in order to explain what we are seeing and in order to predict what we are seeing as well. In terms of a neurophysiological activation, research has shown that the action observation network is preferentially engaged by contingency within movement patterns. So In the very last step, we aim to identify objective kinematic features and also interpersonal kinematic features that can help explain why temporal decoupling of the agents worsened the recognition of anger and affection, but not the recognition of happiness and sadness. Okay, if you want to know what we found, please feel free to check out our preprint, and I thank you very much for listening.